Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 BMW Championship Initial Research Show. But a very exciting finish to the FedEx St. Jude with Lucas Glover winning back-to-back tournaments, winning at the Wyndham to get himself into the playoffs, and now winning the FedEx St. Jude to cement his spot at Eastlake. Exciting finish. Patrick Cantlay had a big charge on Sunday. Corey Connors, Cam Davis. So lots of players moving in, out, and whatnot. Hideki Matsuyama and Cam Davis are the two that I know have moved in. And I believe it was Alex Smalley and Denny McCarthy maybe that moved out. I'm going to have to cheat here very quickly. No, Mackenzie Hughes and Nick Hardy are the two that played their way out of the BMW Championship. But we are here, everything for BMW and Olympia Fields. Hopefully you had a very successful FedEx St. Jude Championship. Mine was a little bit of a mixed bag. Cam Davis gave me a little bit of a decent sweat this Sunday afternoon, making a decent charge. Ends up coming in top 5. It was the only outright wager that I made for the week. DFS was about even. Decent amount of Jordan Spieth, who I mentioned last week I was very high on, considering how unique he looked like he was going to be, and he was. But not enough to offset the Tommy Fleetwood, the Patrick Cantlay, who I was a little bit down on. Victor Hovland, who I was down on. So little good, little bad. Good suggestions and bad suggestions. Russell Henley played very, very well. Alex Smalley did not. So good and bad. But we are here for the BMW. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, all of my social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Kick. And I started to stream to Kick this weekend. Started with the Friday Night Chill stream. So thanks to all of you who joined me on Friday evening. Hopefully you had some successful showdown lineups to go with it. All of that. So all of the social media in the description. Twitter, where I place research for the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. I will try to find something tomorrow for the BMW Championship. It'll be a little bit difficult only because the course changes seemingly every year. So nothing to do with course. We might look at some players in the BMW Championship. But even then, it went from top 70 players to now top 50. Not sure if I'm going to have much, but I will try to find something for you for the BMW Championship. But that research is always posted to Twitter and Instagram. So if you would like to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards weekly on the PGA Tour. Of course, that will be no different. I'm sure I will have some wagers for the BMW Championship. So if you want to see the wagers that I put up and every week on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I do my baseball content. That will pick up in September as soon as the PGA Tour finishes and I get back from my vacation. So if you would like to see quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then finally for my social media, my Kick link is in the description. Highly suggest or ask that you follow me on over there, especially if you are much more into the gaming side, much more laid back. We generally have music going, but I will stream pretty much whatever, even research if you want to see that over on Kick. So give me a follow over on Kick. Follow that link in the description over there as I've started to stream to Kick. And finally, for social media, Gabe's Twitter is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. highly suggest you go give him a follow and subscribe to that article over on Substack. It is free. It's a very good way to start your week of preparation for the tournament at hand. I have not heard from him this weekend. I know he was doing a lot of tiers contests, so I'll make sure to catch up with Gabe at some point before tomorrow night's show to hear how he did. But I highly suggest that you go give him a follow and subscribe to that article, because if you are a subscriber to his article, you will be able to join us come fall when he picks up his chats again and continue the DFS talk after calls on Wednesday nights. The only way you will be able to join him and myself over in his chat is if you are a subscriber to his article. So go show Gabe some support and follow that link in the description. And finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Again, how much success did you have at the FedEx St. Jude? Who do you think has the early, or who do you think is the early favorite going into the BMW? Who do you think is going to suit well for Olympia Fields? How much do you know of the course? Who do you think plays their way into Eastlake? Who plays themselves out? All that good stuff. I would love to hear from you all. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 BMW Championship. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening with the GCSA tournament fact sheet. And this year, as I mentioned, we are at Olympia Fields North, which has hosted a major. You'll have to excuse me, I do not know which major off the top of my head. We'll be able to look at that in Fantasy National. But Olympia Fields has hosted a major. It is in Olympia Fields, Illinois, outside of Chicago. I am not sure how close to Chicago, but I know it's fairly close. And Olympia Fields, North specifically, is a long par 70. Par 70, so only two par 5s again, 7,366 yards. So while it is not a long course defined by Fantasy National, since it's not over 7,400 yards, with it being a par 70, we are looking at a pretty darn long and difficult setup for the BMW Championship. You see the stimp meter listed at 12.5. That is certainly fast. Could be lightning. We will have to see how the forecast is, or what the weather's been like up in Olympia Fields. And especially tomorrow, we'll check Wind Finder, see if there's any rain, if it's going to slow it down or whatnot. But these would probably tend to be lightning, listed at 12.5. And when you start to see 13s, that's definitely lightning. Olympia Fields, nothing to do with course architect. It is a Willie Park Jr. design, renovated most recently in 2013. So no architect filter. Specifically around the course, the greens slightly smaller than the tour average, right around 5,200 square feet or so. Average on the PGA Tour anywhere between 5,500 and 6,000 square feet. The acres of fairway, very, very narrow, 20.7. One of the smallest numbers I have seen in terms of acreage of fairway. When I went through Pro Visualizer earlier, looked very narrow, tree lined. Again, I do not remember Olympia Fields off the top of my head, even though it hosted a major. I was not big into golf at that point. So if you are very familiar with Olympia Fields, feel free to jump in chat and correct me if I am wrong in anything that I have gathered looking at Pro Visualizer and Fantasy National. But very, very little fairway. Not a whole lot of rough either, with only 2 water hazards, but those 2 water hazards come into play on 8 of the 18 holes. So again, a lot more water to be coming into play. We saw that be a big effect this past week at the FedEx St. Jude, even though water only came into play, I think, around 9 or 10 holes. So even though there's only 2 water hazards, they do have an effect around Olympia Fields. The greens, we are on Bent and Poa Annua, and we've seen this a few times this year. most recently at the Rocket Mortgage in Detroit. So we'll be able to narrow in on those specific courses. And in fact, we are on Bent and Poa annua throughout the majority of the majority of the course, including the fairways. However, the rough is Kentucky Bluegrass, listed at 4+ inches long. So probably going to be very, very difficult to play out of, would be my guess. And certainly long rough, we could look at that in terms of a filter in Fantasy National. So there's a look at Olympia Fields in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Nothing to do with Architect. Main things we're going to be looking at: long par 70, 7,366 yards. I imagine we're going to be looking at fast, maybe even lightning, Bent and Poa annua greens. The greens are slightly smaller than tour average, but nothing drastic. Nothing like the very small greens that the FedEx St. Jude and TPC Southwind had last week. Very little fairway, so I imagine these fairways are going to be difficult to hit. 8 holes with water in play, and of course the Bent and Poa annua, as I mentioned. All right, so there's a look at the GCSA tournament fact sheet. We'll move now to Fantasy National, and you will see that 2 players have been starred, Nick Hardy and Mackenzie Hughes. They are not in the top 50. The 2 players who are not listed in Fantasy National and will be by tomorrow are Hideki Matsuyama and Cam Davis. So those 2 are not in this page view as it was loaded in today. But your top performers in the past 36 rounds that made it to that made it to Olympia Fields and the BMW: Scotty Scheffler, Tyrrell Hatton, John Rahm, Rory, Xander, Ricky, Tommy Fleetwood, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantlay, and Russell Henley. Surprising to not see Lucas Glover. I'm sure he will really rise once the FedEx St. Jude gets loaded in. A couple things we can perhaps take a look at. Let's take a look at... We can take a look at no-cut events. We did this a little bit on Wednesday evening in the DFS Tactics show. It's a little difficult to do only because we have to go all the way back to the calendar year 2021 to do so. But we'll have the FedEx St. Jude loaded in, so we could do that and look at this again tomorrow. But in no-cut events, except for last week at the FedEx St. Jude, our top performers that are at the BMW this week: Rory, Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, Victor Hovland, Sung Jae, Matt Fitzpatrick, Colin Morikawa, Sam Burns, Scotty Scheffler, and Tyrrell Hatton. Various amounts of rounds here. Fitzpatrick did not play very well this past week at the FedEx St. Jude, so I imagine he will fall quite a bit. Wyndham Clark, much the same, did not play very well. Actually might have been last this week. Of course, Lucas Glover is going to rise. Cantlay is going to be extremely high. But there's a look at your top performers in no-cut events in the calendar year 2021, essentially, because 2022 and 2023 have not had the no-cut event designation in Fantasy National. One other thing I guess we could look at, even though this course is not over 7,400 yards in terms of raw yardage, this will play like a long course as a par 70 at 73.66. So we'll take a look at long courses, and on those courses, I'm going to bring this to 2022 just in case. Still filtered for the last 36 rounds. Our top performers at the BMW this week on long courses: Sung Jae, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Xander, Matt Fitzpatrick, Wyndham Clark, Keegan Bradley, and Patrick Cantlay. All right. That's a couple of the filters that I've been thinking about. Of course, we'll take a look at some putting here momentarily. However, what I want to do, we'll go into the course breakdown for a moment, but we'll move to Microsoft Excel shortly after. as this is the course breakdown from when Olympia Fields hosted the major. For Olympia Fields, the scorecard a little bit different since they really emphasized long par fours, and there are quite a few long par fours here at Olympia Fields, but I don't think that many. I don't think we have 5. No, apparently we do 4, 5, and 1. 3, 5. So they've lengthened one of them. So this is actually fairly close. So when Olympia Fields hosted a major, we'll come through, look here, like the 14th and 15th easiest were right at par. Being a major, you would expect a major to be very difficult. No surprise there. The easiest hole, the opening par 5, did play to about a quarter of a shot under par, but you see it's not an eagle hole by any means. Only 1%. It's a decent birdie chance. The other par 5 on the back only plays to 5/100ths of a shot under par. So these par 5s are not the scoring opportunities that they were at the FedEx St. Jude. And you've got several holes, and I mean several holes that are very, very difficult. The finishing par 4 18th plays to a third of a shot over par. Quarter of a shot, 2/10, 2/10 over par. Not a lot of double bogeys per se, just lots and lots and lots of bogeys when Olympia Fields hosted its last tournament. For strokes gained, you see putting was the predominant factor. Off the tee, decent, but around the green is very, very high. And that makes a lot of sense. If that rough is indeed that long and the fairways are seemingly very, very narrow, hitting the greens seem like they're probably going to be pretty darn difficult, especially with the plethora of long iron approaches that seem to be mandatory here. So around the green looks like it could be a decent factor. It was for the top 10s. Now for your top 5s, off the tee really started to carry some weight. And then for the winner, it was all about the putting. But look, the off the tee and the approach, dead even, essentially. So around the green will have a little bit of a factor, but off the tee is going to play a pretty decent deal this week, I believe. Approach might, but I'm kind of looking at off the tee early on in my research. We move to average strokes gained by hole by par. There are only 2 par 5s here, but you see the enormous weight they carry. You just have to be able to get that birdie on the first. And par is a decent score on the other par 5 because you're holding on for dear life everywhere else, seemingly. Par 4 is very difficult. Par 3s, seemingly difficult. You got 2/10 over par here. The par 3 13th actually played to the second easiest hole the last time Olympia Fields was seen. But the par 3 8th that is measured at 254 here, and it's actually been lengthened, plays to a quarter of a shot over par, and then 6/100ths over par. So 2 very difficult par 3s, a difficult one and a seemingly fairly easy one. For your top 5s, more so into the par 5s. And then for your winners, as you would expect, or at least for your winner, par 4s. So it's surprising to see the par 3s not add too much. Maybe, perhaps, all the par 3s are so difficult that they're just garnering bogeys. That's a little surprising to see for me, but it is what it is. We're looking at par 4s or par 5s, and then for the winners, really played well on the par 4s. Hole composition, 1 par 3 measuring to each of these lengths. And I believe that's what I have as well for Pro Visualizer. Yep. So 1 each here. This will be slightly different from Pro Visualizer. I think there's 2 here for 5-1, but fairly close, and there is a majority in the 450 to 500 par 4s and one long par 4 at 500 plus. Now the par 5s, I believe, have been separated. So I believe one plays slightly under 600 yards, but it's pretty darn close. Still a couple of long par 5s, including the opening hole, 624 yards. You see, we don't have any approach shot metrics there from when it was either the U.S. Open or the PGA. That data is generally proprietary, so we don't have that. But I do have the estimated Pro Visualizer approach shots. Driving accuracy, very, very low, as I would have expected. 1, because it was a major. 2, this course just seems to be very narrow, tree-lined. Fairways are not very wide. So accuracy, very low here. Green and regulation percentage, very, very low here as well. And scrambling is difficult to do here. So it looks like we're going to have a lot of around the green emphasis this week. Perhaps looking at some scrambling. I don't think we want to ignore greens, because if somebody is able to hit the green in regulation, they're going to be gaining a whole lot on their fellow competitors. But I don't think it's going to be, I don't think you're going to be able to avoid not having to use your short game in your chipping game at Olympia Fields. 3 putts per round, slightly higher than the tour average. Not by much, but slightly higher. Distance was extremely higher than the average tour event. Again, for a major, but I imagine that players just knew that they were going to miss the fairway generally, so they just wanted to get closer to the hole. That would be my guess. But again, I was not big into golf when Olympia Fields was seen, so feel free to correct me when if I'm wrong. And then green regulation proximity. These greens are slightly smaller, so if you are hitting the green in regulation, you are generally closer to the hole than the average tour event by about 1.5 feet, 27 and some change here. 29, just over 29 at the average tour event. So there's a look at Olympia Fields in Fantasy National. I will bring up Microsoft Excel very quickly, and again, this is from Pro Visualizer. So you see the same par 3s here, 1 in each range. We have 2 in Pro Visualizer that went from 350 to 400. 4 from 400 to 450, 5 from 450 to 5, and then the 1 at 500 plus. And then the par 5s were split on Pro Visualizer, 550 to 600 and 600 to 650. Apologies, I will swivel out of the way for that. And there you go for the par 5s. What's going to be interesting is to take a look at these proximities. And the 175 to 100 is the back 9 par 5, the one that does not measure 600 on Pro Visualizer. So if you think the pros are going to go for that green in 2, you would move this over to here. But even that par 5 first had a 100 plus approach shot, even though it was set up as a true 3-shot hole. So it very well could be a true 3-shot hole. Both of these par 5s could be true 3-shotters. But there's a look at the estimated proximity per Pro Visualizer. Majority of them coming from 150 to 175. It was interesting to note that that had 0 from 175 to 200. It's just kind of interesting, considering the amount of 450 to 500 par 4s. You would think that there would be some 175 to 200s. But the majority of these 450 to 500 par 4s are on the shorter end of that spectrum. So 150 to 175, we will see, especially tomorrow in the data dive, where or if that played a big factor the last time Olympia Fields was seen. So I wanted to make sure I brought over Pro Visualizer and had a comparison against Fantasy National. We'll come back to Fantasy National. It's really bothering me that I am not remembering when Olympia Fields was last seen. So I am going to have to do a little bit of digging here. And again, okay, so it was seen in 2020 for the BMW. So it wasn't a major. It was the 2020 BMW. Okay, that makes more sense. So I'll bring this up. So Rahm won it with a -4. You see it was very difficult every single round. The rough was long. The greens were listed as fast. All right. That gives us a good amount of information here. And we'll really dig into this tomorrow. But let's move back to the players that are in the field this week for the BMW. We'll do a little bit of digging, but going to be honest with you, it's going to be a pretty darn short show because there is no early look file. I did not feel comfortable comparing past BMW championships since they were 70 players. Now this is 50 players. So I'm going to treat this just like the FedEx St. Jude, as this is like the first year going forward with a 50-man tournament, essentially. But tomorrow we'll go through Olympia Fields' prior leaderboard and see what played and what not. But for this evening, I've got a feeling that off the tee is going to matter a little bit. In fact, let's bring up the strokes gained. We'll just take a look at the strokes gained. So you see Jon Rahm off the tee. If we highlight the top 15 here, just convenient for ties, top 15. Let's see, only 3 negative and off the tee, and 1 was essentially field average. A couple of players negative, so all 3 of the strokes gained were negative, or had 3 players negative in terms of around the green, or gosh dang it. All 3 strokes gained categories had 3 players negative relative to the field. God, get your life together, Nick. All 4 categories had 3 players negative. So no real lean there. And in fact, the highest number is actually in the strokes gained approach from Cantley. Kind of interesting. So we'll take a look at kind of all of them, I suppose. In the past 36 rounds, let's bring this into 2023. Absolutely. Don't want to go too far back. In the last 36 rounds, our top off-the-tee players in the field this week: Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Rory, Ben On, Corey Connors, Tyrrell Hatton, Siwoo Kim, Lucas Glover, and Cam Young. Our top approach players: Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Lucas Glover, Collin Morikawa, Xander, Ricky Fowler, Justin Rose, Jordan Spieth, Rory, and Corey Connors. So several players here, top 10 in both of the ball striking. Scotty Scheffler obviously being number 1 in both. Lucas Glover's top 10 in the past 36 rounds. Rory and Corey Connors are top 10 the past 36 rounds in both of the ball striking categories. If we look at around the green, which is going to carry some weight this week, absolutely. Scotty Scheffler, our top around the green players the past 36 rounds: Scotty Scheffler, Ricky, Brendan Todd, Jason Day, Tommy Fleetwood, Tony Finau, Justin Rose, Chris Kirk, Rory, and Wyndham Clark. And in terms of specifically putting, I'll bring this out to 2022, but there are 4 courses that are on the PGA Tour that have Bent and Poa annua consistently. Or 3 consistently and 1 this year. So the first is Detroit Golf Club, the most recent that we saw for the Rocket Mortgage. We were at Oakdale Golf and Country Club for the Canadian Open this year. It had Bent and Poa annua. We traditionally are at Silverado. That's the Fortinet. It's been a little while, but that also has Bent and Poa annua. And finally, TPC River Highlands for the Travelers has Bent and Poa annua. So those 4 courses are going to make up the subset of data here in terms of putting. And you see not a lot of rounds, only 20 being the max going back to the start of last year. But on bent and Poa Annua surfaces in the past year and 6 months, your top putters have been Xander, Sahith Theegala, Adam Hadwin, Tommy Fleetwood, Keegan, Eric Cole, Terrell Hatton, Nick Taylor, Harris English, Taylor Moore, and Ricky Fowler. All right. Now that we have seen, or I got my life together and saw or found the previous Olympia fields, something we could definitely hone in on is I don't see this playing much differently based on the GCSA tournament fact sheet. Let's take a look at difficult rounds to par. So let's see, is there enough from 2023 in terms of difficult 36 rounds? Yeah, it looks like it. Looks like most players have into the 20s. So yeah, in the last 36 rounds going back to the start of this calendar year, our top performers when a round has been difficult have been Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Rory, Wyndham Clark, Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, Jon Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Jordan Spieth, and Collin Morikawa. All right, again, not a whole lot this evening. We can perhaps take a look at the tournament history just because this is the BMW. They have been no-cut events, but not 70 players, 50 players. Our top performers in previous BMW championships, and again, there's no early look file. I didn't feel comfortable setting or comparing all of that against 70-man fields when this is going to be a 50-man field. But our top performers at previous BMW championships, Patrick Cantlay is technically your two-time defending champion of the BMW Championship. Tied for 12th in 2020 at Olympia Fields. Jon Rahm, 4 straight top 10s, including a win at Olympia Fields. Rory has played him well. Tony Finau, Xander, Corey Connors, 4 for 4. Or I said 4 for 4. 2 top 10s and then 2 kind of middling performances. Sungjae, 3 top 15s and a clunker. T56 out of 70, not very good. Scotty Scheffler, T3 last year, T20. We have Sam Burns, top 20 and a top 10. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played BMW championships well. Max Homa, very poor. He did play the BMW fairly well last year, but before that, nothing higher than a T59 out of 70. Pretty poor. Tom Hoge has not played BMW championships well. Brian Harman generally has not played them well, but his best performance was here at Olympia Fields. Siwoo Kim has not played them well. Chris Kirk. Collin Morikawa has not played the BMW Championship well. Seamus Power, Wyndham Clark 0 for 2, or essentially 0 for 2, just bad performances. Jason Day, really bad. Russell Henley has been bad at BMW Championships. So there's a look at your top, best, and worst performers at BMW Championships. Like I said, no early look file and nothing to compare courses this evening. Since this is not a full field PGA Tour event, I'm not going to be comparing against other courses. So a much shorter show tonight. But tomorrow we will be digging in very heavily into this prior leaderboard from Olympia Fields. See how it played, figure out a lot of the metrics and filters that we think we're going to want to focus on, and then go through the page view and see who has been playing those the best. So thanks for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. Reminder, please let me know if you had success for the FedEx St. Jude Championship. Would love to be able to shout out you if you had success, and members of the community that do. For yours truly, it was a middling week. DFS was a slightly losing proposition, but considering my lack of success in these small premier fields, the WGCs and whatnot, historically I will take the performance that I had, but we're going to have quite a bit to improve upon to try and win this week at Olympia Fields. So thanks again for all the support. For all of the wagers that you made this past week for the FedEx St. Jude Championship, for all the DFS contests you entered this past week for the FedEx St. Jude Championship. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.